Thank you. Yeah, I'm okay.
Check, check.
Check.
Dina, your mic. Just check your mic.
Check.
Thank you, and thanks to TIE Global for hosting this session. And when we were asked what could be an appropriate enough topic that we could speak about, and me being in financial services, I thought, let's talk about something that's actually a challenge as well as an opportunity, which is the future of financial services. Technology is the enabler of change, but with change comes a certain element of chaos as well. And this organized chaos is what we are seeing in India as India gallops forward across all the metrics that we are so proud of. On this panel, I am honored to have JP Morgan, Subha. He's the CTO. So I was just telling him that from a large bank, usually folks at MD level sometimes lose touch with technology because they are at the leadership level. But the amount of passion that he brings to any tech speak that we've been having over the last 1 week since we've started talking or engaging is really remarkable. So thanks, Subha. Dina, I'm proud because I'm also looking after Kochi as a region. So Dina is the 100th unicorn in India and the first from Kerala. So very proud to have you on this panel, Dina. And Charu, a consultant in a past life and today looking after digital and business strategy for one of India's fastest growing private sector banks, IndusInd. It's awesome to have you as well. Without further ado, I'll have a couple of questions. We can probably look at those questions one by one and in any particular order. No particular order, actually. The first question is the topic itself, right? Banks or traditional institutions versus fintechs. Is there any congruence that you see? Especially because both, banks are typically seen to be running legacy infrastructure, legacy architecture, and typically also seen to be slightly slow to embrace change. And we have, of course, one of the largest banks in the world sitting here, and that too the CTO for India. So over to you, Subha. Do you see banks and fintechs coming together at any point in time, or will there always be competition?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to have a small disclosure. So the views that I'm going to share are not JP Morgan views or my views, personal views, but definitely in the industry for more than 3 decades. I learned a lot and want to share some of the perspectives. So if you look at the ecosystem, right, the way fintechs are growing, the way banks are growing, both will exist together. If you look at some of our large banks ecosystem, and if you look at the mobile versions or the .com versions, a plethora of fintechs influence is already there. Right? If you look at any large bank in the US, a lot of aggregation happens across different, whether it's the financial management or the tax returns or the some of the niche capabilities on the mortgage side of it or the lending side of it. A lot of fintechs influence is already there, and then a lot of collaboration that happens. So in simple, both will exist together and then help each other and then grow in the market with ever-evolving customer needs and the shareholder needs.
And Dina, you're a disruptor, right? So the same question to you. Do you see the banks as competitors or do you see them as enablers?
See, that's why I wanted to go second to the bank. So the way I look at it is fintechs further the cost, or now the entire financial ecosystem, financial services part is coming together as an ecosystem. So in an ecosystem, there can't be a winner-take-all, or one person cannot take care of the entire needs of the ecosystem. So there are evolving business models which are coming up. There are evolving needs which are coming. We are in the midst of a great digital transformation. All of these factors put together, where fintech has come also is where varied needs of the customer has to be catered to, which probably might not be a bank's forte, or it might not be the focus of a bank. So this is where, if you see, there is a kind of, any evolution would always have a bundling, unbundling effect. And today what we are seeing is, in the fintech also, when it started solutioning for the customers, for the ecosystem, started with unbundling different functions. In India, if you see, it started off with lending in probably, payments first, and then it started with the lending. And now you see a great portion of intelligent bundling which is happening. And that cannot be done by fintech alone neither. And there is the ecosystem wherein there is a regulator, regulated entities, and then comes the fintech who is specifically looking at either a specific segment they are targeting or a specific use case they are working for, which is where I believe for this ecosystem, the bank-fintech partnership is going to be something of a collaboration and not of competition. And that's where matters a lot in redefining the way we go forward in the entire way we look at banking itself.
Thanks, Dina. And Charu, you are one of India's fastest growing banks, right? You're on the cusp of embracing technology like you've never done before. How do you see this question?
So I think the way banks in the country have always operated, banks had mostly used technology to bring process efficiencies, for the large part of the last decade. And it's only a very recent awakening for the banks, and thanks to the fintechs, honestly, who started coming into the market and showing a different way of taking a problem-solving mindset instead of, I can say, by and large, a product-led mindset to approaching a customer. So banks have woken up to it. We realize that there is an opportunity here to use technology to solve consumer problems and to do it in a smarter way. And the challenge that banks have, of course, one is that there is tons of legacy. Not just the technology legacy, infrastructure legacy, but also legacy in terms of culture, people, talent. It requires an entirely different DNA in the organization to be able to leverage technology towards building customer products a fintech way. So while banks are getting onto their own journey in their own way, but collaboration with fintechs is a given because like Dina said, be it payments, be it lendings, wealth fintech, there is absolutely a path in a way which fintechs have shown on how can you actually do that product in a much simpler manner, in a much more convenient manner for a user. So there are 2-3 areas in which we collaborate with fintechs. One is pure technology collaborations, analytics collaborations. There are fintechs which are working with us in those areas. And then there are fintechs where we co-create products with them. Either we take what they have created and extend it to our consumers because we can immediately add that value to our customers instead of us trying to build that over a period of time. And other where we basically take our products and infuse that inside a fintech. So there are certain strengths that banks have. We understand prudence, we understand governance, we understand consumer protection.
You understand distribution.
Distribution and risk management. And our approach to these aspects is in a way proven. We don't have to do a hit and trial way of figuring out what will work in lending, what will not work in lending, for example. So we can take our products, infuse that into a fintech ecosystem and create a win-win. So it's a very vibrant ecosystem at the moment, the way it's emerging, and collaboration is certainly the way forward.
Perfect, perfect. And you actually answered your turn for my next question, right? So to the both of you. So before that, I mean, what we say as a firm, as KPMG, we advise, we consult across a broad spectrum of private and public sector banks. We are seeing this huge trend of banks, even public sector banks, not building what they can buy, rent, or lease, right? And that's in terms of functionality. And Charu, you gave some very good examples. So maybe, Dina, yourself as a provider of these solutions, where do you see the areas of most intersection with the banks because the hypothesis that it is collaboration and not conflict has been proven, at least for this panel. So where do you see the areas where you can collaborate most? And similarly for you, Subha, because you're running a large accelerator program within JP Morgan as well, right? So your views.
So in terms of the synergies or intersection, if you see, as Charu rightly mentioned, for the banks, the strength is defined in the sense they understand risk, where when it comes to regulation and compliance, which is one of the biggest things, because at the end of the day for the regulator also, when you're handling money or anything to do with the banking system, it's extremely critical that there is an oversight on what's happening. It has to be customer-centric and you have to take care of the interest of the customer. So all of this is tested and tried, as she rightly mentioned, with a bank right now. So which is where we also, when we are building it, the problem is that the customer also requires something like banking and beyond, because banking is one portion of the money flow or the transaction. When you do a transaction, banking is where the money matters, and there is a whole lot of things which happen on the other side. And that's where merging both, rather than banking looking at the face of the customer, how do you merge both? So that's where the entire concept of embedded finance is also coming right now, wherein ecosystems, the banking or the money flow is not separate from the transaction flow. So this is where we also ride on the bank's strength when it comes to regulation, when it comes to, for example, our product Circles it's a business operating system for small businesses. And the heart of it is a current account. Are we providing current account? No way or not. We ride on a bank's infrastructure, connect to the core banking system, and then we facilitate the customer. There we are an enabler. Whereas when it comes to all other services, be it compliance, be it a payroll, be it accounting, which is around the transaction which is happening, we build. And then again, when it comes to lending, are we the best lenders? We are not. So we don't get into anything on how do we underwrite or see the customer. But the fact is that today, if you look at MSME, if I talk about the segment we function in, right, there's a gap of 400 billion on the lending. Where is that happening? I mean, is it because banks cannot do it or they are not capable of? I don't believe it is. But when you look at it from the user's perspective, the need where the SME, when they're coming in for a lending, for example, they don't have a structured way of showing the data. This is where we as enablers help them structure. Then come to a lender who can actually take a call on them. So this is where, as a regulated entity, the bank would still be the one who is the lender. But we become the enablers. So that's where the whole collaboration. So if you look at it, anything to do with regulation, regulated entities, and compliance, that's where the bank comes into picture. And from a customer's perspective, customer data and protection perspective, and we end up solutioning for the customer backward. So that's where that combination works perfectly for the customer at the end of the day, and he gets better value overall.
Perfect, and great business and functional examples. So Subha, over to you for some, because of your great provenance in tech, right, and now what we call digital, where do you see the most amount of correlation or the most amount of collaboration from a technology perspective?
See, what's happening right now is, with the personalization, right? Hyper-personalization is something that's happening. And hyper-personalization at the real time is one of the biggest things that's happening. And that's one space. And second, I think channel interoperability is another big thing where a lot of banks are investing, right? These are the two big areas. I'll explain what exactly is the hyper-personalization at the real time. So if you look at the fintech, right? Most of the fintechs, they solve one particular problem to the core. Whereas if you look at the advantage that banks has got, the big banks has got, they know the customer, they know the life events of the customer, they have got a lot more perspective about the customer and need of the customer. So the combination, I think we need to play to the strengths of banks and fintechs, and in the overall journey of the customer, if you can play to the strengths of banks and then the fintechs and surface what is the right solution for that customer at that moment, right? At the time of interaction, the moment of truth, with the power of fintech and banks, if we can surface that, I think that's a killer combination, right? That's number one. And second is channel interoperability. This is a lot of companies are still evolving and then maturing on this capability, where I start certain transaction, the channel of my choice. It can be a chat or mobile or online or on the phone. And I should be able to navigate from that particular channel and then start in one channel and end in a different channel, but still seamlessly doing things with the power of some of the fintechs. And a lot of big banks are using a lot of fintechs in achieving this particular combination, right? So this is another use case where a lot of innovation is happening.
Right. And innovation cannot happen unless and until the road is smoothened in terms of the cost of attainment of technology and the innovation itself. What we are seeing specifically in India is the mass consumerization of technology, right? In terms, when I say consumerization, something which used to cost a bundle maybe 10 years ago can actually be achieved through low-code in record time today. And of course, you got to pay for the low-code licenses, right? So in terms of this consumerization of and that's just one angle. In terms of consumerization of technology, do you see that? Okay, again, I'm a consultant, so I may be blamed for saying, hey, that's another concept you're throwing. But you guys are on the ground, right? So do you see that happening, mass consumerization of technology actually enabling you to achieve innovation faster?
Yeah, why not, right? I think it's happening, right in the center of the, all the technologies. Where digital is definitely, you will see, but not just in the digital side of it. If digital is the face, right? But if you look at behind the scenes, the lot many systems that runs, just to make the digital up and running. Your core systems, your analytical systems, everywhere, it's happening.
Okay. Dina?
I'm a big believer in embedded finance going forward, and that is where you have just asked me a question which is close to heart as well. So, low-code, no-code enables, even, what we have seen from experience also is that this enables even non-fintechs to come look at their, and totally different business models, to look at their ecosystems, because they are all building ecosystems, and they all have anything to do with banking or something to do with payments which is going on in their ecosystems. So traditionally, it was very difficult for them to put it in their systems at all. But now, with the low-code, no-code coming in, they need not understand the intricacies of what's happening, how the tech should be built, what should be the stack, because fintech, or rather finance part of it and the banking part of it, always used to be completely separate from what they were doing traditionally, because they never wanted to focus on it, though there is a great business model lying there. Now, this is technically the democratization of banking going into where the transaction is, and those getting embedded. And that's where I think this is going to drive the future as well, and that's what I mentioned in my early response also, wherein we will see more and more of transaction and banking, or the flows getting blended, and that happens through this democratization, in fact. That would have been impossible if you think maybe 5 years earlier. Think of a society management software thinking of providing banking services to a customer, because that's not the core at all. Or think of a NBFC providing enablers in terms of how they can manage the rest of their services. Unthinkable, rather, they would have never thought of those rails earlier. But today, that's a possibility because of the democratization. And that's where API banking also will drive the way.
Correct. A lot of concepts there, Dina. Thank you. Charu?
No, it certainly speeds up. I think one of the simplest examples is machine learning. Once we have our data warehouses set up, we don't really, we have so much data, and how do you do better underwriting, better decisioning for the customers? And a lot of machine learning that we use nowadays to build those models is, it's a very simpler technique compared to how analytics was earlier, where basically the machine basically decides the features which are most relevant to predict the outcome that you're trying to predict. And so analytics is one area where a lot of that is coming in. Another area is testing. I mean, we do use a lot of automation now in testing. Otherwise, with so many devices, so many operating systems, so many different versions, it's impossible to manually test that. And you have to deliver, if you have an application, you have to almost deliver enhancements every couple of weeks on it. So it's not possible to run that without complete automation in the entire deployment cycle. So many areas where we use a lot of tech stacks which are ready and which help drive it. So certainly, and especially for organizations like ours, which are banks, who never had a lot of engineering or tech talent, um, building systems from scratch, like fintechs, for them, it's probably makes a lot, it allows us to go to market a bit faster with some of the things that we want to do.
Correct. And funnily enough, we speak to a lot of these new age providers of these low code, no code systems, and they've got a moniker or a tag for Java, Angular. They call it high code. So I sort of use that quite freely, right? I say high code and low code. So they've said low code works and high code will probably take some time, right? So that was something new that a friend of mine who runs a low code, no code company in India sort of informed me about. Another, because I've got this august panel here, it's one series of questions on myth busting. Okay, crypto, CBDC, metaverse. How much of this is real for you in the next 12 months to 18 months in terms of changing or altering your on-ground customer-facing strategy? And how much of this is, hey, that's my hobby project right up there? Any order?
So maybe from my perspective, our perspective, to look at it, irrespective of crypto or the technology behind, especially when it comes to blockchain, I think that's going to redefine the way we look at payments, transactions, everything going forward. Which is where CBDC also think of the cross-border part of it, right? That is going to be, I mean, it's just not going to look the way we see it today. So that is where, of course, if we are not guarded against it, or rather, if we don't innovate on that side, we might be out of the whole scene. I mean, it is a kind of disruption that we are just right in the phase. While rest of it, yes, it has to evolve, and we need to see how that's going to. You still might have time, but the way the blockchain is a technology and that is being used in multiple places, I feel that's something which makes us or keeps us on our toes in terms of that should be next level of innovation we should do, and think of how all it will get disrupted.
Yeah. So from the large bank standpoint, right, I think a lot of big banks invested big time in crypto, and not on the currency side of it, but on the platforms. So JP Morgan itself built a big platform called Coin, Co-Innovation Network, where you can exchange dollar for a coin, and then you can do cross-border payments, which is quite operational right now. And we are making much progress in the blockchain, especially with the blockchain technology, and we are really ahead in the overall ecosystem, right? From the AI/ML side of it, it became a lot more commodity right now, in the sense in most of the solutions, we use AI/ML right from sourcing of the talent and all the way down to the lending decisions. We have hundreds of models. And a couple of years back, we can count the number of models on, with the fingers and toes. But right now, I think you need a lot more numbers to really count. So it's more commoditized, and then we are adding, models, every other sprint, right? So coming to the Meta, in my view, it will take 2 to 3 years or maybe more than that. The reason I said that is a lot of companies invested in Meta, but if you look at the age, the people who are active on Meta is still young. And then the spending capability on the Meta is still low, right? While, number one, the maturity of the platform need to get better, and then the seamless integration to the existing ecosystem has to be better. So how do I go from existing platform to the Meta and come back to the existing platform? That seamless journey, these ecosystems need to mature. I think that experience has to come out. But on the Meta, a lot of investments are happening. Probably in another 3 to 4 years, we'll start seeing a lot more revenue. But I think at this point of a time, not much. So these are the 3 areas.
Yeah, and Charu, in the chaos of Indian banking, right? Do you have the time to spend to actually even evaluate these technologies?
No, certainly. And I think the CBDC pilots have also started here. And blockchain, we also have some use cases on blockchain that we are experimenting with. I do think blockchain as a technology will evolve to solve a lot of problems, especially on cross-border payments, like Dina also said, on supply chain. So eventually, as it matures, as the ecosystem comes together and interoperability across different blockchains also comes into the being, because right now it's a bunch of many blockchain frameworks which are there. Eventually, once the ecosystem all comes together and becomes interoperable, I think it can be very disruptive and it can unleash a lot of innovation on products and make payments, lending, happen in a much swifter manner, in a very different manner than the way we do it today. And in a cross-border use case, so trade finance could be completely reinvented on the blockchain. But it's evolving. I see it more imminent compared to metaverse. But metaverse also, right now it's more experimental. And there are some use cases, I think, which people are exploring, like engaging training in the metaverse, where you actually you're able to recreate a human experience. Maybe there will be transactions happening in the metaverse. At the end of the day, we would like to be wherever our consumers are. So if consumers start doing transactions in the metaverse, and then finance will have to be happening there, and lending may be happening in the metaverse. So we got to be ready for that. So we are evaluating it, we are looking at it, and hopefully we'll see some pilots in Indian market too soon. Yeah.
Correct. And an analyst or a consulting view on this is the number of, like rightly said, the number of pilots that we are working with clients on have sort of increased, but these are pilots. None of them are moving into actual productionizing of a functionality in either of the three areas that we spoke of. So hopefully, say 2023, 2024 gets us to, okay, move from pilot or POC to production in some areas, right? And we probably have 5 minutes more, so I'll probably end off with one more question. So we've spoken about the opportunity, we've spoken about the exciting times technology affords us, as well as consumer adoption of all the new features that banking and financial services along with fintechs are providing. But I have one honest question to ask. That is, what's keeping you guys awake? There would be some elements of regulation. There would be some elements of risk. I mean, the brake of a vehicle is as important as the accelerator, right? So what's keeping you guys awake in all these exciting times? Where do you see any element of danger that's creeping in?
Yeah. So cyber is number one. Definitely, we need to, fraudsters are always ahead of, those big banks. And then if you look at the US big banks, these banks lose millions of dollars every month, right? So billions if you really look at it. That's number one, cyber. And then the other thing is the regulation. Most of the regulation that's coming is in favor of the customer, right? Not towards the banks. I think that's the biggest thing. And especially when, and I'll give you an example, right? So let's say there's a fraud from the, customer did a mistake. What regulation is coming is in the favor of customer. Even though customer did a mistake, the regulation says, you have to, banks has to return that money to the customer, right? So these kind of things put a lot of toll on the banks before, and then if you don't do the transaction, probably, you lose the customer satisfaction. If you do it, if there's a risk associated with it, you end up in taking that liability. So cyber and fraudster are the biggest, biggest threats.
Dina?
So from a fintech perspective, particularly predominantly working in India, regulation and the changes thereof, which defines the relationship between fintechs and the regulated entities, that itself can be a big bearer, have a big bearing on the way business models function. So regulation it bears the highest in terms of what we do, so that, looking at the being compliant, being on the right side of the law, and guarding for, business models being done for the flexible for changes which are looked at. And the second part, of course, is the infrastructure, because we being, again, collaborating and working, that's where the availability of the infrastructure defines what we do. And third, I can't agree with Subha more on the cybersecurity and how secure the entire ecosystem, or rather what we are building is, because there are a lot of partners, a lot of places where we connect to, and the customer data which is committed there. And the fourth and the biggest, the disruptions which are going to come, and the modern technologies innovation. So that would be the four things I would put it on.
Okay, I have an interesting answer to this. I'll probably reveal the answer at the end of, after what Charu has to say.
So I think regulatory landscape is evolving very fast and changing very fast. And we have seen like businesses shut down the very next morning. There are certain models on which the regulator has come down very strongly. So of course, that is something that we increasingly have to be careful about, and understanding the regulations in the spirit and not really in the letter is the key. Even though a lot of areas are regulatorily undefined, but we got to be understanding where the drift of the regulation and operate in the spirit of the regulations. So that is one area. And I would agree with, what he said. Cybersecurity is another area, especially as we open up and we start integrating into the ecosystem. Then data privacy, cybersecurity, the new data privacy law, which is hopefully, which has come, the draft bill that has come, and how that impacts a lot of our open banking-led business models is something that we have to look at carefully. Yeah.
So the answer that I want to reveal was, we ran a small survey to some of the CEOs and MDs of companies in consumer markets and industrial manufacturing. What's keeping you awake? And they said two guys, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Because the way those guys are innovating and creating complete disruption in their sectors is unprecedented. It just takes them between 12 to 24 months to enter a sector and change it, right? So that was an unconventional answer to probably what you were saying, but I take on board everything that you said, and that sort of brings us to the end of the panel. If the audience has any questions, happy to field them. But again, thank you to all of you. It's been extremely enlightening to hear three stalwarts of the industry speak on this very interesting topic. Thank you so much.